I read 80 books so far in the year 2024, and here are the best books that I read this year. All the books that I have included on this list are ones that I have read for the first time. No rereads, just brand new books to me. I would say that all the other books I read in 2024 were kind of hit or miss for me. I either didn't like it or I just kind of felt, yeah, this is an okay book, but it wasn't anything crazy. I think I am a little bit selective about what I rate highly and what I don't. So maybe you'll agree with my ratings, maybe you won't, but rating is subjective, and these are just books that I enjoyed. Were they the best written? Maybe not, but sometimes it was just the right book for the right mood, and that's why it got a high rating for me. So I'll start at number 10 and I'll go all the way to number 1, which will be my favorite book so far this year. Starting out at number 1 is Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. I really enjoyed this. This is a very atmospheric gothic fantasy. Phantasma follows Ophelia as she newly inherits her mother's necromancer magic, and Ophelia's sister decides to enter the competition called Phantasma. With this, it is a very deadly competition, and so Ophelia decides to enter as well in hopes to save her sister. They are separated for most of Phantasma, so she is trying to find her sister and help her make sure she survives. With this, there are demons that run the competition, and Ophelia decides to maybe team up with one, which she knows might not be the best idea. And with this, it follows just a romance. It's very gothic, it's very atmospheric, and I really enjoyed this. I thought it was just very entertaining. I wanted to know what was happening next. I would definitely recommend this, definitely during the spooky season. I know the next one is coming out, and it will follow Ophelia's sister. Will I read it? I'm not sure. I might. If I do, I would probably wait until next fall. But I just really enjoyed this. I thought the vibes were there. It was a good time. Number 9 on my list is The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. This is probably one of the most odd books that I have read this year. If you don't know what this is about, this book follows Caroline, and she has multiple other siblings. I believe there's 12 of them, and their father is basically God in this world, and he has basically taken in these 12 children and decided to each give them a specific catalog that they have to learn, and one of them is like Caroline's, hers is languages, so she is proficient in every single language that there is. One of them is war, I believe. The other are like animals, so they can speak to animals. But just know that this book is weird. If you go into this, definitely check the trigger warnings. It is a little bit disturbing. They talk about a lot of stuff in this book, and is it always necessary? I'm not sure. But I read this having seen, I think, a couple other people talk about it. I know one was Carrie Can Read. I can't remember who else I saw talk about this, but I was just kind of intrigued by what they said, and I was so, they warned what this was about and what went on in this book, but I was just so interested in, like, oh my god, I can't believe like this is happening. And I was reading this, and I think that this is a book that is very borderline, not horror, but just disturbing, in that line of a little bit of a mystery, a little bit of fantasy, I guess more paranormal in a way. But I was just so kept on the edge of my seat in this. I really had no idea what was going on at any point. And did this book scare me? Yes. Could I walk down the stairs and see a dark room? No, because I was terrified that someone was going to come out and kill me, honestly. Maybe you'll read this and you'll be like, this is nothing. But me, I was like, oh my god. But I really enjoyed it, honestly. I think that going into 2025, you'll see my list is mostly fantasy and mostly romance, except for this one. I think this might be one of the only like mystery thriller type books that I've read this year, and I want to really diversify my reading more in 2025. This one, if you are looking for a very odd, very different type of book, I would definitely recommend this. But again, check the trigger warnings, see what's in it, because it can be a little bit disturbing at times, but I enjoyed it. Number 8 on my list is Not Another Love Song by Julie Soto. This book follows Gwen, who is a violinist, and Xander, who is a cellist, and they work together on the Manhattan Pops, which is a like pop orchestra. And Gwen has recently been promoted, and Xander is very jealous of the position that she was given, and he does not like her. He's kind of a jerk, but it worked for me. They meet and they basically have this super strong tension when they play music together. Also, if you don't know, this is, if you can't tell by the cover, I feel like you can kind of tell by the cover. If you know, this is a Raylo fanfic that was like turned into just a book. And I don't know if it's just that thought, like that fact, but this did kind of give me the similar vibes of an Allie Hazelwood book. And if you don't know, her books are also Raylo fanfictions, and I love her books. And maybe that's why I liked this so much, is because it just kind of gave me the same vibe as those, and I just love those. I definitely can see why some people wouldn't like this if they don't like Xander. He's kind of a jerk, but it was good. What can I say? I just really had a good time reading this, but I definitely don't think this would be for everybody, but I really enjoyed it and I would recommend it. Number 7 on my list is Funny Story by Emily Henry. This is her newest release that she came out with this year. Daphne is engaged to Peter and Miles is engaged to Petra, and Peter and Petra are best friends and they decide to leave their respective partners and decide they want to be together. And Daphne moves in with Miles, and in the beginning they are both very sad, very heartbroken. Daphne is a librarian and Miles works at a wine company, I believe. As Miles and Daphne are living together, they decide to kind of team up and start kind of posting pictures, hanging out with the other to kind of show off to their exes that maybe they're together or just kind of hanging out and doing better without them. I wouldn't even say that the romance really stood out to me in this book a crazy amount. What mostly stood out to me was Daphne's relationship with her mom. It had me crying in the middle of an airplane after visiting my parents for the first time in a while. It just really made me miss my parents. Just really liked that aspect of this book. I just thought this was a good time and I really enjoyed it. Number 6 on my list is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry as well. I had heard so many people say that this was one of their least favorite Emily Henry books. I actually bought this copy at Half Price Books and wasn't even sure if I was going to read it, just purely based off of the fact of seeing how people didn't really like it that much. Was their least favorite Emily Henry book, but I saw way too many pictures of them filming the show and my best friend and I were like, maybe we should read it. So we buddy read this and I actually loved this. I would say that this is probably my number 2 Emily Henry book that she has. I just really enjoyed it. I normally am not too crazy about a then and now timeline. They just don't really work for me. But in this, I just loved the relationship. And I really liked Alex in this. This book basically is a then and now timeline of Poppy and Alex. Poppy is a travel blogger and Alex, I believe, is a teacher. They would basically go on these trips together and she would write for her blog, and eventually she started working with this travel company and would write articles for that. Eventually along the way, they kind of stopped talking and stopped being friends. And it is years later and Poppy was invited to Alex's brother's wedding, and so they basically hang out for I think a week before then and kind of just rekindle what they had, and I just really enjoyed this. I'm just now realizing that I have another book on this list that is very similar to this one in terms of the concept, but I just really liked getting to see the progression of them becoming comfortable with each other again. I would definitely say that this is number 2 Emily Henry book for me, and I am so excited to watch the show or movie. I don't know which one it is when it comes out.
Hey guys, Tigor54 here, coming back at you with another YouTube video.
Number 5 on my list is One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book made me ponder so much. I also read this book with my best friend, and the whole time we were reading it, we were just constantly asking each other, what would you do in that situation? This book follows Emma, and she is married to her high school sweetheart, Jesse. Emma is a freelance writer and Jesse is a production assistant, and he decides to go on a trip and he never comes back. And it basically follows Emma in her grief as she is trying to reconcile with the fact that her husband is gone and that she has to move on. And it is very, very sad. As time goes on, she meets Sam, who she was friends with in high school, and they decide to maybe try to go out a little bit. And as they are kind of progressing in their relationship, it is revealed that Jesse did not die, that he is actually alive, and he comes back, and you see that Emma and Sam are together, and Jesse is here, and he's very different in some ways, but Emma is also very different in other ways too. She's not the person that she used to be, and she kind of has to decide who she wants to be with, if it's Jesse or Sam, and it's such a unimaginable situation that you would have to be in. And my friend Isabella and I were just like constantly like, so what would you do? Like if your boyfriend died and you met somebody else? I was like, we were constantly talking about this and constantly like, what would you do in that situation? It's such a insane situation. I, in the end, was happy with the decision that Emma made. I think it made sense and it was the person that I was rooting for. Of course, I was rooting for everybody because this is such a terrible situation that they're all in. But it was so thought-provoking for me. I just was like, what would I do? It's so hard to imagine what you would do in this situation because first of all, you'll probably never be in this situation, but it's just so crazy to think, how do you pick between two people that you love? It was such a emotional book. I loved it. I really, really enjoyed this. Number 4 on my list is The X-Files by Jessica Joyce. I recently read this in my last reading vlog and I just really enjoyed this. I realize now that this is a pretty similar concept to People We Meet on Vacation. This book follows Eli and Georgia, and they are exes, and they don't really talk anymore. They try to avoid each other, but their best friend Adam is getting married and everything is going wrong. So they have to come together and try to save his wedding, and they have to spend a week together alone and just basically try to save the wedding. And in that, they have to talk about a lot of the things that they really aren't comfortable talking about and things that were basically the reason that they broke up. And there was so much tension in this book, and this is a second chance romance, and I feel like normally I don't like these types of books where they broke up and now they're kind of getting back together, because I just feel like sometimes the characters haven't really grown. Should they really get back together if they haven't grown from who they were? And in this book, I think it was so prevalent to see that both characters had grown a lot, and that it kind of made sense for them to try getting back together and seeing where things went. And I just thought that there was so much tension and longing in this book. I loved it. Number 3 goes to Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This was my first 5-star of the year, and I feel like for that reason, it just holds a very special place in my heart. I wasn't sure if I was totally expecting this to be a 5-star. I have enjoyed Abby Jimenez's other 2 books that I've read by her, but I noticed that there was always a kind of third act conflict that I wasn't too crazy about. And in this one, I honestly don't remember what the third act conflict is, but even if I hated it, I still loved the concept of this book, and I just really enjoyed this. This follows Emma is a travel nurse, and Justin is, I don't really know, it doesn't really matter what he does, but they basically meet on Reddit, and eventually Emma ends up taking an assignment that is in the city and state that Justin lives in, and Justin is having to kind of take custody over his younger siblings, and Emma is very unfamiliar with putting down roots, and the relationship she has with her mom is very unstable, and you see them grow this connection as the time goes on, and it's just so sweet, and it really is just so wholesome to see the little things that he does for her. And I just love Abby Jimenez's writing. I think it's the perfect balance of like a rom-com with the like heavy emphasis on the comedy. I think they're funny, but also with having things that have really deep and emotional themes. But she doesn't let that completely take over the book, but it's still very impactful in the way she does it. And I just love her writing. I can't wait for all the other books that she comes out with. And I do want to go to her backlist and read the ones I haven't. But I just really enjoyed this. This was so just perfect to me when I read it. Number 2 on my list is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I had such a good time reading this. This book is told in a very interesting format where it is basically all dialogue. It's kind of written in a play-like format where it's just different characters talking, and I just think that this really worked for me. All 3 Taylor Jenkins Reid books that I have read are 5 stars. This one follows Daisy Jones, who is a singer in the 1970s, and the band The Six, and it basically follows how they met into how they came together and made this super hit album. At the end of one summer, they abruptly break up, and it just follows each of them recounting their experiences years later. And it was so interesting to me. I think that Taylor did a great job of really differentiating each person's voice. It was so interesting to see how you're kind of hearing this story be put together, but it's slightly different depending on who's telling it. It's like one sentence is one recollection, the next it's like another person, and then they're telling it just slightly different. I just thought that was so well done, and like I was like, what really happened? Like, I don't know who I believe in this situation. And I had a little bit of bias towards certain characters, so obviously I believe some a little bit more than the other. But I think one of my also favorite things in this book was Camila's perspective. I think we're just so interesting, and homegirl's stronger than me. But I just really, really enjoyed this. I think that the ending was very impactful, and this book used so many different terminologies for different drugs and so many different drugs names. I literally had to look them up on my phone. I didn't know what some of them were. Drug use is very prevalent in this book. I would just say overall addiction, drugs, alcohol. This is definitely a party band in the 70s. So beware. And coming in at number 1 on my top 10 books is Heartless Hunter by Kirsten Ciccarelli. Did I just finish this today? Yes. Is that maybe overriding some of the emotions? Perhaps. But I just genuinely thought that this book was so interesting from the start. It follows a witch and a witch hunter, and in this island that they are on, witches are outlawed, and our main character, Rune, is basically hiding in plain sight, and Gideon is a little bit suspicious of her, so it's kind of just this courtship and going back and forth, kind of cat and mouse of both of them. She's aware that he's suspicious of her, and he is trying to play her. And I just thought it was so interesting. I think from the very beginning, it really just immerses you in the story. I would say this is kind of gothic, maybe, but then at times like they're talking about wearing leggings. Did that take me out a little bit? Yeah, but did I still love the vibes? Yes. There was so much tension in this forbidden romance, and I just loved it. The ending, I did guess some. I think it was a little bit predictable, but I didn't really guess it until probably like 80% in. I was starting to make some pretty good predictions and guesses about what was going to happen, but in the end there were still things that happened in the end that I was genuinely shocked about. But I just really enjoyed this. I'm very excited for the next book that's going to come out in February. Is this the most amazing book I've ever read? No, but it gave the vibes that I wanted it to give. But those were my top 10 books of 2024. If you guys agree, if you disagree, let me know. I want to know what your top favorite books of 2024 were. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!